For the longest time, we've thought of conservation as saving nature from change. But what happens when nature itself is changing, and faster than we've ever seen before? That's the huge question we're tackling today. How do we write a new blueprint for conservation on a planet that's literally rewriting its own rules? For decades, the goal was pretty straightforward, right? You preserve some pristine wilderness, you put a fence around it, and you keep it exactly as it was. But with our climate in constant flux, that old playbook, well, it's just becoming obsolete. And that's the core challenge we're up against. How in the world do you protect a moving target? All right, so here's the game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to get a handle on the sheer scale of the crisis. Then we'll dive into 3 key strategies that managers are now using: holding the line, bouncing back, and believe it or not, leaping forward. And finally, we'll see how these big ideas are actually being put into practice in one of the most biodiverse places on the entire planet. Okay, to really get what's at stake here, we need to look at a place where the biodiversity is just off the charts. And unfortunately, so are the climate threats. So let's zoom in on India. Just let that sink in for a second. India, a single country, is home to a staggering 8% of all known species on Earth. It contains 4 of the world's 36 global biodiversity hotspots. So yeah, what happens here has massive, massive implications for the entire planet. And look, this isn't some far-off, distant problem. We're already seeing these things called phenological shifts, which is just a fancy way of saying nature's timing is all out of whack. You've got plants flowering at completely the wrong time for their pollinators, we're seeing species on the move, corals bleaching, and extreme weather becoming the new normal. The threat is here, and it's happening right now. So what this all means is that we have to totally rethink our approach. That old goal of preserving a perfect static snapshot of the past, it's just not possible anymore. The new goal has to be way more dynamic. We have to manage ecosystems for what can actually be sustained in the world that's coming, not the one that's already gone. So how do we do that? Well, the first strategy, which is called resistance, is probably the one that feels most familiar to us. It's all about defending what we have and holding the line against change. Basically, resistance is all about fighting back. It's about taking direct, hands-on action to help an ecosystem or a specific species just hold on right where it is, even with all this new climate pressure. The goal here is pretty simple: prevent change and keep things as they are for as long as we possibly can. So what does this look like in the real world? Well, it's very hands-on stuff. It means aggressively going in and removing invasive species that thrive in warmer temperatures. It means using prescribed burns to stop catastrophic wildfires before they start. It could even mean building dikes to hold back rising seas, or tackling other problems like pollution to just give the ecosystem a fighting chance. But, and this is a huge but, here's the catch. Resistance is kind of like trying to paddle upstream against a current that just keeps getting stronger. It's incredibly expensive, it's labor-intensive, and it doesn't actually solve the underlying problem. It just buys us time. It's a really valuable buffer for sure, but it is not a forever solution. Okay, so if holding the line is really just a temporary fix, what's next? Well, that brings us to our second big idea: resilience. And this one isn't about preventing change. It's about preparing an ecosystem to absorb it and bounce back. Think of resilience as an ecosystem's ability to take a punch. A drought, a flood, a heat wave, and get back up again without completely falling apart. The goal here isn't to stop the punch from landing, but to build up enough strength and flexibility so that the system can recover. Building resilience is all about strengthening an ecosystem's natural toolkit. So what does that mean? It means protecting a wide variety of habitats and the genetic diversity within species. Super important. It means creating corridors that connect fragmented landscapes so animals can actually move as the climate changes. And sometimes it even means restoring natural processes, like fires and floods, that these places evolved with in the first place. This is why you'll often hear resilience called a no-regrets strategy. Because actions like restoring forests or connecting habitats, they're just good for conservation, period. No matter what the future climate looks like exactly, these things are going to help. It's just a really smart, safe bet. But what happens when the change is so big, so profound, that bouncing back to the way things were just isn't an option anymore? Well, that's where our third, and by far most radical strategy comes in: transformation. Okay, so transformation is a massive leap. It's basically accepting that the old ecosystem is gone and it's not coming back. So instead of trying to preserve the past, you focus on actively guiding the transition to a new kind of ecosystem, one that's actually built to thrive in the climate of the future. This is managing for change, not against it. And the actions here are, well, they're bold and sometimes they're pretty controversial. We're talking about things like assisted colonization, which means physically picking up a species and moving it to a new location where the climate will be suitable for it in the future. It means realigning our restoration projects. So you're not trying to recreate the past, you're trying to build brand new ecosystems that are future-proof. Now, this approach is without a doubt the most forward-thinking, but it is also by far the riskiest. I mean, when we start to play God by moving species or designing entirely new ecosystems, we run the very real risk of creating new invasive species problems or setting off a chain reaction of consequences we never saw coming. It's a super high-risk, high-reward proposition. Okay, so let's just put these three side by side for a second. You've got resistance, which is defensive. Its goal is to help things persist. Then you have resilience, which is adaptive, helping them recover. And finally, transformation, which is proactive, actively guiding change. Each one has its place, right? You use resistance for your most precious, irreplaceable assets, resilience for dealing with moderate change, and you only pull out transformation when massive, large-scale change is absolutely inevitable. So which one do we choose? Resistance, resilience, or transformation? Well, the smartest approach isn't to pick just one, it's to build what you might call a conservation portfolio that uses all three strategies together. Think of it like a bet hedging strategy, like you would with investments. So at a really small scale, you might use an intensive resistance strategy to protect one critically endangered species. Then at the broader landscape level, you'd use a resilience strategy, improving connectivity for all the species in that area. And maybe, in a nearby area that's already highly degraded, you might experiment with a transformation strategy, trying to create a new ecosystem designed for the future. You use all the tools in the toolbox. All right, let's bring this all back down to earth and see how this whole portfolio idea could create a blueprint for a country like India. For a vast, diverse, and resource-dependent nation like India, resilience really forms the core of the strategy. That's the big piece of the pie. It's that no-regrets approach that provides the most benefit across its huge, fragmented landscapes. Resistance is used more sparingly for those really high-value targets. And transformation? Well, that's a small but necessary part of the long-term plan, save for areas that are facing unavoidable change. A key part of India's resilience strategy is this brilliant idea called ecosystem-based adaptation, or EBA. And this is so powerful because it creates a total win-win. By restoring something like a forest watershed, you not only create and connect habitats for wildlife, that's a win for biodiversity, but you also provide incredible benefits for people. We're talking stable water supplies, protection from floods, carbon storage. It directly connects human well-being to the health of the ecosystem. And really, that's the core message here. Our success in navigating the environmental challenges of this century is going to depend entirely on this mental shift, on our ability to stop clinging to the past, and instead to start proactively managing for a very, very different future. And that leaves us with one final and really difficult question. This new reality forces us into a kind of conservation triage. With limited time, money, and energy, we simply can't save everything. We have to make tough, gut-wrenching choices. So how do we decide which species and ecosystems to invest everything in, and which ones, heartbreakingly, we may have to let go? That is the defining conservation challenge of our time.